episode 33.
Not quite live from Studio 502 here in the Midwest, home of the one and only Hippie Memorial. That's true. It's true. There is a Hippie Memorial here. And other commodities and oddities. This is Life's Learning Curve, the podcast. This is the podcast that helps us build the better us. We find the better person within all of us, and we do that through sharing stories, storytelling. I'm your host, Paul Hart. I'm a former educator and current media technology producer and liver of life. We're in season 2 and we're in show episode 33.
Our guest, Erik.
At his career's beginning in broadcasting, when given the option, he had an option to choose a location, a broadcasting market that was farther away. It was adventurous. It was a new place he had never been before. Smaller market probably. Or he had the option of choosing a place closer to home, more local, knew more people. What should you choose? Well, it doesn't always really matter. You don't have to go for the adventurous one or the safe one. What you are bringing to the job is you. And wherever you go, you're going to bring you. And that's what he did. Regardless of the choice he makes, the adventurous one or the local one, he still brought himself to the situation. He met some amazing people and begins to gather some really diverse stories and adventures throughout his life. In today's episode, we're going to hear some of these stories, which were journaled to begin with, and then became an outline for a book. So today's Life's Learning Curve piece spans a career in broadcasting, which output a gaggle of real and sometimes unbelievable true life stories. So let's get going. Life's Learning Curve. I'm Paul Hart. Episode Roswell Calling. Stand by. So here we are today in Studio 502, and we're here with Erik Iverson. Erik, how you doing?
Real good. Thank you very much for having me here, Paul.
Well, it's nice to see you here.
Well, you and I are high school buddies, and we played in the band together and stuff like that, and so we're kind of a musical background, but we both have kind of quirky personalities, so I think this will be fun here, actually.
Tell us a little about yourself.
Basically, used to be a broadcaster. In fact, when I was in high school, I went, did all the stuff with WEPS, high school radio.
Great place to get a start.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then went to Butler University after high school, and went to WAJC Radio, was the student-operated station at Indianapolis at Butler University. 50,000 watt radio. It was fantastic, absolutely. Yeah. And I became a sports director, and I covered all kinds of stuff. Butler University sports is really kind of big now, but it wasn't all that big then. Yeah. But it's fun. I saw Larry Bird play a couple of times.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah. He had 49 points against Butler one time.
Oh, my gosh.
His college career high. After Butler, I started in my radio and TV career. Wow. It was, I went from a small radio station to TV in Evansville.
It all started at a small radio station in Evansville.
I'll tell you something. It's kind of fun. And I think back in the day when I was younger, a lot of kids getting out of college started at a small station and worked their way up. Now, there's a lot, since there's so much media now, because, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there were not as many TV stations. I mean, cable was in its infancy.
Right.
So there wasn't 150, channels in your cable system.
Erik Iverson demo reel flashback. Somewhere between 1980 and 1990.
Whether the sport is at the professional level, major college, high school, or amateur of any kind, I've covered it. And I've covered it as both a photographer and a reporter. You're looking at a sportscaster who really enjoys his work. I guess it's just a sports fan that's in me.
I was a talk show host for a while. I'm sitting in a studio with a microphone in front of me like this, an audio mixer, things like that. And then on right in front of me, there's a window, a glass, and on the other side of that glass is an engineer or a producer, and they're cueing you.
And they're waving their arms, and they're giving you
the stretch it out or whatever, spot,
Let me tell you about my afternoon. Yes. I'm sure you've had some interesting moments when you've had to stretch in some situation or not. And I work with a gentleman who, when he knows he has to stretch, he thought he had 10 seconds, but he's really got 30. All of a sudden, his cadence changes, and he's like, next time you're in Wilmette, you've got to try. He looks at the time, and he goes, Wilkerson's brand sausage. Yes, it's Wilkerson's brand sausage. Let's hear that number one more time. It's pretty obvious. That's an editor's thing. You can tell.
And of course, you see a lot of those late night TV commercials where they used to repeat the phone number 15 times.
Right.
Well, it gives them something to do to stretch a 30-second copy into a 60-second commercial. Our phone number now is 555-1212. Remember, it's 555-1212. No, it's 555-121. And it's superimposed on the screen. Yeah. Write it down, exactly. Tell your friend.
Tattoo it on your, exactly. What was it that took you to Butler? Why that university? What
sure,
a good story from there?
Well, sure. When I was in high school and senior year, you're trying to find a college to go to and things. I always wanted to be a broadcaster, and that's what I was aiming to do.
Yeah.
And I always had this, when you have a dream or whatever, sometimes you get that dream when you're 10 years old.
Yeah, right.
I always wanted to be a broadcaster.
Interesting. Did anybody know?
Everybody, all my friends.
Apparently, wasn't your friend though, because
you weren't my friend back then.
I wasn't your best friend back then, but
well, I didn't meet you until junior high.
Yeah.
But we lived out in Sherwood Oaks, east side of Elgin,
right.
And there were several of people that all our high school. I mean, there were a lot of high school kids that I was friends with that lived out there, and so they knew I wanted to be a broadcaster. But in fact, we would play baseball.
And you'd call it,
and I would call the action. Fly ball to Mike out in right field. Mike's circling under. Oh, he misses the ball. Kip's rounding second base. He's on his way to third. And so you're actually doing the play-by-play.
Yeah.
And as you're 10 years old, calling the action.
Yeah.
And of course, Jack Brickhouse was a Cubs broadcaster back then, and everybody said, "Oh, you should be the next Jack Brickhouse." And I kept hearing that as I was growing up.
That's good though.
You'll be the next Jack Brickhouse. And every broadcaster has their niche. As they get older and they get known for whatever sport they're covering or whatever news event they're covering, some news reporters get known for being a political reporter.
Right.
They're worthless, and you put them out at a drowning. They don't know how to do a simple
live news.
Live news. But they're really good at interviewing the local politicians and things like that. That's their niche. Howard Cosell, his niche literally was boxing. He was a big-time boxer.
Yeah.
He was behind Muhammad Ali and all these guys.
Made him famous.
And he could be a ringside announcer. Fantastic. But ABC knew that they had a popular commodity in Howard Cosell, so they put him on that Monday Night Football, and he was kind of a fish out of water. I mean, Meredith and Gifford would basically be the play-by-play guy, and Meredith being the former Cowboy quarterback.
There's your color guy.
Yeah, but they had Cosell in there for a while as a kind of a
novelty.
Novelty.
Yeah. One of my favorite interviews from Cosell. There's quite a few. Look this up on YouTube, guys. Cosell was in the booth by himself, and he interviewed John Lennon. Now, John Lennon just happens to be at the ball game. He goes up into the booth with Howard Cosell. If you want to see a clash of generations, there you go. Yeah.
At Butler, you learn how to do everything. It's a student-operated station, so everybody runs the station, literally. So
that's so good.
You're a DJ. You learn how to spin the hits, as it were.
Yep.
You learn how to be a newscaster. You learn how to be a sports guy. Now, obviously, some people didn't want to do sports. They had no interest in sports, so they're not going to make you do sports if you're not interested in sports. But almost everybody took their turn at being a newscaster.
Yes.
There was a radio, there was a late night, it was like a 10 o'clock half-hour news wrap-up. And every night there was always different, kids, different students doing that news wrap-up for that particular day.
Sure.
And so you learn how to, get yourself together and present the news in a professional manner. You want a funny story?
Yeah.
I was doing
I'll be the judge of
I was doing one of these half-hour shows. We called it we actually called it the Carr Iverson Shed Report. It was John Carr, Erik Iverson, and Ken Shed.
Okay.
And he was
sounded like a band I was in once.
Kind of, exactly. Yeah. It was. It might have been. Shed was the sports guy. I was actually a news guy at the time. And John Carr and I were anchoring the news, and we were reading the UPI news story about a chemical explosion. Now, John has got the lead story, and he's reading this story, and he gets about 3/4 of the way through it. Now, the produced newscast is he would read the top story, throw it to me, and I would get the next 3 stories in a row.
Gotcha.
Well,
because he's got the.
Well, he's got the
boom
at that particular point, at that particular night.
Okay.
Anyway, he's reading the script, and he gets about almost all the way down to the bottom, and he said the Indianapolis fire marshals were at the scene, and to this date we don't know what caused the malfunction. And he said that. And I heard exactly what he said. And he was going, Erik, and he tosses it to me, and I have to start reading the next story. And he gets up, and he literally runs out of the room. You can hear the door slamming in the background, and it's supposed to be a soundproof room, but you can still hear him laughing his head off because of what he said. He's laughing his head out. The guys in the studio are laughing. They're on the other side of the glass, and I have to read 3 stories in a row
straight
without laughing,
ignoring them. At that point, that you're a true professional. At that point, if you can keep a straight face.
Well, it was tough. Let me tell you,
because I imagine those 2 words are different things. I just have an idea. At a point in my life, probably around 1990, I realized that I became a little bit better, a little bit more probably competitive, or a little bit more engaged when I began hanging around people who had similar interests to me. Not to compete, because we all kind of did video editing and we were out shooting on our own and we were doing independent production. But as competitive as we all were at that time, we would get together and talk every Sunday night or Monday, compare notes on things. And we were at the age I'm at now, which is getting up there, I guess. I realized how great that was, because we were actually all mentoring each other. For you, did you ever have any good experiences with like-minded people and people you just wanted to hang around with?
I interned at WRTV in Indianapolis when I was at Butler. That was my senior year and everything.
Hi, I'm Erik Iverson. You'll be seeing a sports anchor audition in the next few moments.
And the sports director was this old, when I say old, he was getting up there. This guy's name was Tom Carnegie. He's no longer with us.
Legend.
Carnegie was Mr. Indianapolis 500.
Okay.
He was at the racetrack. He knew all the drivers. He knew everything going on with auto racing. He was also big into high school athletics.
Okay.
So a lot of the
locals.
A lot of the stories I did, because he was basically my mentor. But the guy I really wanted to hang out with was the younger sports guy, the guy that was the Monday through Friday 6 and 10 sports guy.
Yeah.
I wanted to hang out with him, but as I found out, he didn't want to have anything to do with me. He didn't want an intern hanging around. He didn't want to do, he was like, get out of my way, kid. You're in my.
Shoot.
And so literally, when you're on a story, you might be on a story. The other TV station's reporter, who might be a really nice guy, and he kind of takes you under your wing, and he doesn't mind giving you some helpful hints while you're out on the story.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what you should do is get your line up your questions and stuff so you don't look like a boob and during the press conference and stuff like that.
Hi, I'm Erik Iverson. You'll be seeing a sports anchor audition in the next few moments.
Well, there was a guy named Don Hine,
Yeah.
and Don Hine grew up in Geneva. So
Okay.
he worked for a radio station
Local.
in Geneva. Yeah, a local guy, Illinois and stuff.
WGSB.
Yeah, he worked at WGSB. Anyway, he was a sports guy at WTHR Channel 13 in Indianapolis. So I really kind of liked to hang around him. And when he was kind of let go or whatever, they had a staffing reshuffle, and he found himself out of work. He came over to WRTV on a part-time basis, and he taught me a lot. So he was a guy that kind of mentored me
Interesting.
in the early part of my career.
Real purpose we are here today is I wanted to talk to Erik about something he's been doing
You should write a book.
creatively regarding his life and his work, probably a span of your entire life.
The thing about writing a book is that after you've been doing something for a while, in this case I had a broadcasting career for about 15 years.
Yes.
And there was a lot of things that I worked in small market radio and medium market TV, and up in the Chicagoland area for a couple of cable operations and stuff. And even though they weren't the major network, as we know them, big ticket, big money type stations, I had a lot of things that I was involved with that literally some of the big ticket TV guys had never gone through before.
Yeah.
I mean, I covered murders. I covered firefighters
As a reporter.
union strike. Yeah, exactly. There were just a lot of things that had gone on in my career, for one reason or another, or it was a TV show that I was producing or whatever. Wow. And somebody would have said to me, "Hey, Erik, man, you had a lot of stuff going on. You should write a book." One time I was flying back from Florida after visiting my folks, and I had a notebook in my carry-on bag, and I just started jotting down some ideas. And the next thing you know, I had like several pages of an outline, and I'm like, I could write a book. There's a lot of funny stuff that I've got that literally I think people would be interested in, not necessarily people right off the street who don't really know me or don't know broadcasting in general.
Yeah.
They might not. But on the other hand,
I disagree with you. You've let me read a little bit of what you've written, and a lot of people can relate to this.
when I was at the Channel 7 WTVW in Evansville, I was hired as a crime reporter. But as a nighttime reporter, you cover all kinds of stuff. You cover city council, you cover this story, you cover that story. You do a lot of feature stories.
Sure.
You do everything. So it's not just what I was hired for. You do all kinds of stuff. My news director used to send me on some of the most oddball stories or things that were put in the story file that actually happened the day before and things like that. So,
the balloon launch was beautiful yesterday. Here's where the balloons were on the ground.
I have a chapter that is referred to as the storyboard. And literally, it's all these different oddball stories. There's one in particular where the news director sent me on a story that had actually occurred the day before. And so she...
Was this an accident? Or are we going to find out later?
Well, maybe she just wanted to get me out of the station for a day. I don't know.
Okay.
But it was a Channel 7 had a small staff. We only had a couple of full-time photographers.
Gotcha.
So everybody, all the reporters had to shoot their own video on occasion. Well, so she gave me the keys to the worst news car in the world. We had this humongous...
Yeah.
And you got to remember, this is 1981.
Yeah.
This humongous Chrysler New Yorker.
Yeah.
The thing was a boat.
Big lead
Oh,
sled.
my, huge.
Yeah.
Anyway, the worst type of all-terrain vehicle you could possibly have. And she sent me on a story from Evansville, Indiana, to a place called Bald Knob Cross, which is literally on the Missouri-Illinois border.
Oh my gosh, that's half the state away.
Yeah, well, and of course, the entire southern part of Illinois, the last fifth of Illinois is the Shawnee National Forest. You cross over into Illinois from,
There's a huge hunk,
from
isn't
Indiana.
there?
You got to drive through the entire forest,
Yeah.
or around it,
Yeah.
to get to Missouri, on the other side. Well,
Yeah.
Bald Knob Cross is this monument someplace. I never did find it, so
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like to this day. The story basically was this. There was an older couple. They lived in a cabin for 30, 40 years on the grounds of the Shawnee National Forest.
Got it.
And the Department of Resources wanted to relocate them. They wanted to get them kind of out of there so that they didn't have anybody living on the grounds of the National Forest. Well, it turned out that a station in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is in Missouri, closer to that area, actually picked up the story, and they actually did
Makes
the story.
sense.
But my news director, for some reason, it escaped her or whatever. She didn't know anything about it. She had it in the story file for a Thursday,
about it.
and the story
For
was
Thursday.
actually on a Wednesday.
Oh no!
So
this relocation, this whole
thing
with the interviews
there
and
was
all that?
supposed to be a press conference and everything there.
Okay.
The Department of Resources and Illinois and Missouri representatives and stuff like that.
Okay.
And anyway, nobody in their right mind would send their lone full-time afternoon reporter from Evansville to drive 2 hours or 2.5 hours across Illinois to the other side to basically the Ozarks, because the Ozark Mountains are literally right across the border.
Okay.
And so, and that comes into play because of what I'm about to tell you. I got lost in the National Forest.
Okay. You're not the first, probably.
She gave me directions, and I had no idea where the heck I was going.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is 1981, you have to remember, and I mentioned it kind of liberally throughout the story, that there are no cell phones back in those days.
Nope.
So nobody carried any cell phones. Nobody had a laptop computer. There was no GPS, none of that stuff. You have to rely on a
map.
On a map.
Yeah.
And
map skills.
And the two-way radio that we had was only good until you got out of town. Once you leave the city limits of Evansville, that radio goes right in the back seat. You can't do anything with it. So I was completely lost. I was on my own. I had no telephone, no way to contact the station. I couldn't find where I was supposed to be. And it was getting dark. This is November. And so now it's like the news director wanted me to get down there, do the story, shoot some B-roll of landscape stuff, because you're going to be in the Ozarks. It's going to be pretty country. So get some video we can use over weather or something like that. So literally, and I'm in the middle of this national forest. I found this tower. Climb up a tower. It's a watchtower. That a forest ranger would use.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I'm about 50, 60, 70 feet up. So, and I'm looking around, and kind of down the road and around the corner and through the dale, I can spot a telephone pole, and I'm like, well, if there's a telephone pole over there, there's got to be a phone nearby
somewhere.
Well, I find a phone outside this little place called Luke's Country Store.
Okay.
And the phone is not a phone booth. It was like hanging on the pole about 30, 40 feet from the store.
Any other people around?
Nobody.
Okay.
Nobody. It's completely devoid of people.
Okay.
It's just like 6 o'clock at night. It's getting dark.
November, it's dark.
It's getting dark. You're looking around for a phone. Guess what you need for a telephone?
A dime back then.
You need some change.
Yeah.
So I'm rifling through my pockets trying to come up with the right change to make the call. I got to make a collect call and hope somebody at the TV station will answer the phone. I asked one of the reporters that happened to answer the phone, who actually kind of grew up in southern Kentucky. I said, what kind of nighttime predators might I run into at this? And she said, well, you might run into a big cat or maybe a rattlesnake or something like that. Well, anyway, while I'm talking to this person on the phone, a cougar shows up. And I dropped the phone. I just let it dangle from the crate. I was like, and I'm running. I see a big cat.
So what did you do? Where did you go?
I climbed up. The Luke's Country Store it was a one-story. It was like this one-story building, and so I climbed up on some trash cans and jumped up on the roof. Yeah. So I'm about 20 feet up. That's about as far up as I could go. And the cat is rummaging through the garbage cans, looking for like this morning's delicacy or whatever, maybe a tuna casserole or something.
That's right.
Well, so I take off my coat, wad it all up, leave it in a big hump on the top of because I figure if this cat is going to jump up and find a reporter up on the building, maybe he'll go for the coat and see if he can see if the cat will fit into a 44 long. And meanwhile I can jump off the roof and hightail it to the car. Yeah. Luckily for me, the reporter that I was talking to on the phone, because I left the phone off the hook, she just heard all this clanging and banging of trash cans and stuff like that, and she called the She called the Union Sheriff's Office, Union County, which is the county in Illinois there. She called the sheriff's office, and they came and they literally scared the cat away when.
Had you not been on that phone?
Well, exactly. But here's the thing: while I was on the phone, before I actually dropped the phone, and before the cat made an appearance, I actually asked Janice at the station. I said, "By the way, what's going on with this story? Where I can't find the cabin. I have no idea where the cabin is." Yeah. And she looked in the story file, and she gets back on the phone, and she says, "Oh, by the way, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that story actually occurred yesterday." And I'm like, what? Of course, and that's just typical of the news director that I had at the time. She would send me on all these oddball stories that she didn't bother to do her homework on. And
time, money, how did you get the job?
You can stay at my place, Erik.
I mean, there's a lot of funny stuff that occurred. She when I first got to Evansville, she hired me from radio up in Marion, Indiana, and she actually gave me the job. And the first week or so I was in Evansville, I was living out of a Ramada Inn, a hotel.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that gets kind of expensive after a while, and so she said, "Well, I'll give you some time to search around for an apartment." But I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. Why don't you come over and spend a couple of days at my house? Yeah. I got this big house. My husband doesn't live here anymore. My kids are at school. Yeah. And I'm like, do I really want to go spend a couple of days with this news director? She's obviously female. Right. And she said, so I'm like,
checking your morals.
I'm like, sure, this is a really good idea, but it was going to save me money in the long run.
Right.
So I go over to her house, and it was like the Twilight Zone. It was.
How so?
Well, the house was a wreck. She was not a housekeeper at all.
Okay.
I mean, there's dirty dishes in the sink, and there's a cat crawling all over the place, licking up,
She wasn't much of an assignment producer either.
Oh, apparently not.
Yeah.
But on the floor, I noticed there were all these envelopes, like manila envelopes, and a whole bunch of butcher knives. Literally, one steak knife after another.
Yeah.
On the floor. And I'm like, and we're walking through the house. There's like a trail of knives on the floor.
You had been a crime investigator prior to this, so you're like...
Well, exactly. Yeah. And so I started asking her questions, and she told me just to kind of shut up. And her daughter's away at college, so I'm going to use her room because it's cleaner. But I walk into the room, and there's this pink laced 4-poster bed. I'm going to be sleeping on this for a couple of nights. Oh, brother, I open up the closet. There's every stuffed animal and shoebox in the world flies out at me. Yeah. Well, during the night, at about maybe 4 in the morning or so, I had no idea what time it was. It was so dark in that room. I couldn't see a watch. There was no clock. I had no idea what time it was. But I hear voices like in the hallway, and I open up to get out of bed. I open up the door, and like I hear faint noises, voices at like 4 o'clock in the morning, because after I opened the door, I could see what time it was. And I'm like, what's going on down here? You know, 4 o'clock in the morning. She got me all set up at her house at like after the 11 o'clock news. So it was literally midnight when we got to her house. Yeah. So this is like 4 hours later. Well, she winds up leaving the house. She leaves the house. The car's driving away, and I'm like, somebody's stealing her car. Somebody's stealing her car. You know, and so I'm running, and so I put some shoes on. I'm running all over the house. Yeah. There's more knives on the floor upstairs. You got to watch where I'm stepping. Yeah. There's like little traces of blood or ketchup or whatever was on the floor. So I didn't know what it was. It was some red substance. Yes. And I'm like, oh, this is really weird.
Yes, it is.
And I had no. So I'm, hey, Stella, you here? Stella, I'm staying in this news director's house for the first night, and now I'm there by myself. Yeah. The car mysteriously drives away at 4 o'clock in the morning. There were voices, but now there's no voices. Nobody's home. I'm turning on every frippin' light in the house. And I had no idea what was going on. So I had never been through the house before. So I go downstairs.
That's so bizarre.
I find the basement. I start going down into the basement.
This is like a Stephen King novel.
It was like a Stephen King. So I get down into the basement, and I find this great, big, huge, humongous freezer that's down there. It's got to be a 12-foot long. Yeah. And I'm like, I wonder why we never see her husband walking around. He's no longer in the picture.
The crime reporter's coming back.
And there's all these knives and a little bit of blood on the floor. I have no idea what the envelopes are for. And anyway, so I walk right up to the freezer, and there's this red substance all over the floor, right in front of the freezer.
It's got to be blood.
And I'm thinking, there's a body in this freezer. There's got to be a body in this freezer. Well, just about the time I open the freezer and I look inside, she comes home. And she's coming down the stairs to the basement. No. She says, Eric, what's going on? Every frippin' light in the house is on. What's going on? I said, where have you been? The car was... I thought your car was being stolen. You're no longer here. Your bed hasn't been slept in. I don't know what's going on. This is the first night, in her house. I'm like...
In the new market.
It's like my third day on the job. I'm like, holy smokes. And anyway, there's a 10-point buck in the freezer, you know. But she's yelling at me.
What's the big secret?
She is yelling at me because, what are you doing searching through my house?
I'll tell you what.
4 o'clock in the morning, your car mysteriously drives out of the driveway.
You've got manila envelopes with knives on them on the floor, and they lead in a pattern.
Another reporter who had been hired after me several months later, female reporter, she had the same routine. So she was
routine.
She was invited to the news director's house to stay a few days while she's looking for an apartment, and she had the same situation. The knives and stuff all over the floor. The kitchen was a mess. It never cleaned the kitchen. Absolute truth. It was just absolute.
Yeah. Well, you can't write that stuff. Your book. I don't know if it's a running title or if it's the actual title or it's just something you're going with. It's very intriguing to me, and it is.
It's called "If Only I'd Taken Roswell." Not every reporter hits the big time, and it's basically not every because I never made it to the big time, but I have a lot of stories that literally could happen, like you said,
if you'd gone
to anybody.
Yes,
it could happen to anybody.
Yeah,
but. If Only I'd Taken Roswell depicts the first job that I was offered out of college. Right. So the actual story, the first page of the book, actually starts while I'm in the family room of our house. Yep. And it's June of 1979. I'm watching the Cubs on Channel 9, good old Channel 9. And I intersperse some Jack Brickhouse, play-by-play.
Yeah, right.
There, the Cubs are playing the Montreal Expos, and Dave Kingman's coming up, and that sort of thing. And during the game, the telephone rings, and my mom answers the phone, and she says, "By the way, there's a Dave Brown from KBIM TV in Roswell, New Mexico, on the phone." But Mom, Kingman's
up.
Kingman's coming up. Can I take the? Well, you better
Yeah.
take the call. So, of course, I missed the
course
rest
you
of the
did.
game. Kingman hits a home run. I found out later. But anyway, I take the phone call, and Dave Brown from KBIM is offering me, through a couple other phone calls that occurred after that, but he actually offered me a job as a news anchor. I had applied at this TV station for a sports job.
Yeah.
And I send him my sports tape, and he calls me back and says, "We think you'd be perfect for the news job." And I said, "No, I think you mean the sports job because I applied for sports." And he says, "No," he says, "I think you are better than just being a sports guy. I think you can be our news anchor for our 6 and 10 news."
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Roswell, New Mexico is really, really, really small potatoes. And back in 1979, there were only like 203 markets in the country.
Sure.
And I looked it up, and Roswell, New Mexico was market number 192. So it's pretty small potatoes.
Yeah.
And anyway.
Did you wonder, if I go to Roswell, will I ever get out of Roswell?
Well, I didn't know anything about New Mexico except what I watched in old westerns on TV.
Yeah.
I figured there was a Gila monster and rattlesnakes behind every bush and rock.
Right. Probably right.
And it was just desert and dust. I had never in anything that I ever watched on TV did New Mexico come across as this mecca of society.
Right. Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I don't know.
It's so much more now.
Well, from what I understand, yes.
Yeah.
And when I'm 22 years old, I'm not sure I want to go to New Mexico, because if I fall flat on my face, I am, 2,000 miles away from home.
Yeah.
So I decided to turn that offer down. The news director did not want to fly me to New Mexico for an interview. It was all done.
If you were going there, you were going there.
Exactly. There was he wasn't going to interview me in person. It was going to be all done over the phone and via videotapes that you sent to him. So I sent him my intern work at Channel 6 in Indianapolis, which was all sports. Yeah. And so I didn't have any news on there at all. And anyway, but he offered me that job. I turned it down and took the next job. And the next job was for a radio guy, news guy, at WBAT Radio in Marion, Indiana, which was an hour north of Indianapolis, an hour south of Fort Wayne, 3 hours from Chicago.
Nice area.
If I fall flat on my face, I'm
go
not,
any direction.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not very far away from home.
Yeah.
And I got contacts and college friends of mine still in Indianapolis. So it was a better fit.
Yeah. Great area.
And so obviously, if only I'd taken Roswell, maybe my career would have gone a different direction.
Right.
Had I taken that job.
Yeah.
There's one other thing in the book that I do that's a little different than the average guy writing a book, and that is what I did was after, maybe 3 or 4 chapters, and then another 3 or 4 chapters, I would write these transitional chapters, and all it is a what if scenario.
Oh.
So it's transition 1, and it's all right. Through the book so far, we've turned down the Roswell job. We took the job in Marion. We've settled in. We have the first day. We found my new apartment and stuff like that. And then I write a transition as to, here's what might have happened had I taken the job in Roswell.
Okay.
And I do a what-if scenario. Well, if I'd taken the job in Roswell, perhaps I would have also gone to a small little town, like I did I went to La Fontaine to find my first apartment just north of Marion. And maybe I would have found an apartment in Dexter, which is just outside of Roswell. Also a 1,000.
Heading for that Albuquerque circuit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in subsequent transitions, is if I had stayed there for 2 years, which I did at Marion, I stayed there for 2 years before moving to Evansville. Had I stayed in Roswell for 2 years, then next step up might have been Albuquerque, or it might have been Tucson, or it might have been, and so I put market sizes comparable to what Evansville was. Evansville's an 87th market size, and that's where I went after Marion. Maybe I would have gone to Tucson, which is an 83rd market, or maybe I would have gone to El Paso or someplace like that. And so I put in what-if scenarios.
It's interesting because it's a nonfiction book with, your reflections in it, but then you've got this fiction part of it. You have a chapter in your book that I really, really, it made me laugh out loud. And it's called, you call this a press box? so tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's when I was working at WMRO Radio in Aurora, working sports. As a play-by-play guy, I was covering a lot of high school football and college football, stuff like that. One particular afternoon, it was October day. It was maybe 70 degrees outside, beautiful sunshiny weather. Day. Yeah. So my color announcer and I were at Aurora Central Catholic. In Aurora, doing a high school game on a Saturday afternoon, and the thing about the press box at Aurora Central was like anybody's grandfather could have put it together with a handful of nails and a hammer. It was just this rickety old building. It was like, holy smokes, is this gonna hold us? There's no sometimes there's a pane of glass in the press box. If it's there was no window there at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, anyway, my color announcer, a guy named Mike Trasner, he was about my age, young guy, and he was we were actually got up there in the press facility, getting ourselves all ready, got our game notes and everything, getting ready for the kickoff of the game.
Gotta have it.
Well, it's like 70, 75 degrees. It's October, and what usually happens around this time of the year, the bees start to fly every which way.
Right.
Well, Mike just couldn't stand any bees at all. Now, there are wasps and there are hornets. Now, hornets they dart all over the place, and wasps kind of float around, and they're fairly easy to swat out of the air. But there were hundreds of them. There's a hospitality table behind us, so the high school volunteers, the Booster Club volunteers,
down there selling food.
They got roast beef sandwiches, they got hot apple cider, and that hot apple cider is drawing the bees. Bees are coming from every which way. Well, I'm trying to do the game, and Mike has got a rolled up newspaper, and he's like Babe Ruth. He's hitting these things out of the air, and he's swatting them all over the place, and these bees are getting stung. And they're literally, now of course, if you hit one bee, that bee's buddy is going to start attacking you.
Right,
and
so it's like West Side Story.
He's got bees flying all over, and I'm standing right next to him, so I'm like, what are you doing here? Holy smokes, we're trying to do a game here, and he's swatting bees all over the place.
Sure.
Because there's no window, he's swatting bees, and these stunned bees are flying out the window and landing in the laps of the spectators down below. And if one bee drops in your lap, you don't think too much about it. Okay, a bee fell out of the sky. Okay, he'll get away. But all of a sudden, bees are flying every which way, dropping into the stands. People are looking up and going, "What the heck are you doing?" They're yelling up and screaming obscenities at Mike, and he's swatting bees all over the place. This is small time radio.
Yeah, this is.
Come on, holy, it was unbelievable.
A step backward in the career.
Another press box isn't really a press box at all. So Rick Sizemore, he's going to do play-by-play, and I'm going to do the color of an Aurora University game. Now, Aurora University...
Football still?
Yeah, football.
Okay.
They just get their program back after years of not having a football program, and Aurora College became Aurora University.
Gotcha.
So they actually constructed a new facility, a football field, but it was so brand spanking new that there weren't a lot of amenities there. Well, on this Saturday afternoon, it was November, it was rainy, it was kind of this horizontal wind and rain in your face kind of a day, It was cold. It was like 40 something. But you don't call off the game because it's raining.
Not football.
So on the football. Well, there's Sizemore and I get to the field and we're looking around because we don't see a press box, and the booster club guy says, "Oh, there's no press box here. We haven't constructed that yet."
Press box? There's no press box here.
And he says, "Oh, no, we've got that all figured out."
Yeah.
He says, "You see that media tower over there?"
A tower? The media tower?
And Rick is going, "I don't see any media tower. A media tower? What do you mean a media tower?" He says, "It's that scaffolding that's right above the back row of the home side bleachers.
Yeah.
It's like the scaffolding you would see on a window washers, doing the windows on the Sears, on the Willis Tower, And so basically, it's a 20-foot long scaffolding, and on a scaffold you have basically a foot deep plank, but the length of your shoe. And now it's raining, and this is metal. And so you find a spot to stand, you don't move because there's nothing in front and there's nothing behind. And you're up there without a net, so to speak. And we're
without a lot of things, actually.
We're about 25 feet up in the air because we got to be at least high enough to be past the last row of the bleachers. It's raining, and above us on this scaffolding, there's this canvas covering that covers us up. But it's canvas. It's not plastic.
So it fills up with rain.
Exactly. If it was plastic, we just roll off. But no, they couldn't do that.
And that's added weight.
Canvas, and so during the course of the game, it was getting wet. It was all, and now it's kind of dripping down on top of us because it's soaking through. And there's this great big, huge puddle that's forming in the middle of this canvas. So Rick and I are the only broadcasters up there. There's
that's good.
There's a couple of athletic directors and some sports information people and whatever. So they're off to the side of us. And first of all, the whole thing sways.
Yeah.
You had to climb up a rope ladder to get up to the top.
Really?
Yeah. And then you got
Robinson Crusoe.
All your broadcast equipment, you got to bring it up with a block and tackle.
Really?
Yeah. You empty out the box. They give you a little table. It's about 18 inches wide. So you put your audio mixer and whatever on there, and then after you get all your equipment out that you need, you down the pulley, and your boxes end up on the ground because there's no room to keep them up there. So we're up there. Now the game itself is extremely uneventful. It's Aurora against Hope College. We didn't know anything about Hope. Neither Rick or myself had covered Aurora before, so we weren't really that familiar with the guys. The scorecard just turned into this like used Kleenex in your hands.
Yeah, because it's paper and it's raining.
Paper. You can't use a pen when it's raining because that's worthless. You can't use a pencil because pencil doesn't write on water. It's brutal. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
And you can't see the program. The field has turned into a quagmire of mud. And so we're trying to do the action. We can see, is that 67 or 69? Or
it was raining,
We can't tell the numbers on the back. So it got to the point where Rick was like, Smitowski makes a fabulous tackle for Hope College. And I got to remember what name he's using because I have no idea.
Oh, really? So you're just throwing it up.
I'm like, that was, Smitowski. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, Thompson looked good on that tackle. Yeah, Arnold Schmidt, the linebacker for Aurora, is, of course, and that was his mistake, making up a name from Aurora because anybody from Aurora is going to be listening.
Exactly.
Nobody from Hope is going to be listening to our broadcast. So
there's some family somewhere listening to the radio going, "What happened to my boy?" Yeah.
Exactly. Or they're in their car and they're going, "Who is Arnold Schmidt? Where did we get him? He must be really good. We have no idea. We're walking away. The game ends.
Okay.
We do a fast recap.
Yep.
We're shivering. We're cold. We can't
right.
grip anything. And we pull our boxes up. We put our equipment away. It's all soaking wet and everything.
Right.
And we climb down. And as we're walking back to the parking lot, all of a sudden we hear this big boom. And we turn around, and this media tower, the canvas couldn't hold any more water. Just completely, the water broke, and it was like Niagara Falls. We were 3 minutes from getting, under a wall of water.
So Eric, where are you at with publishing your book right now?
Well, because I'm not a known commodity, so to speak, I'm not a celebrity, and
until this.
Well, we hope that this is watched by all the big
launch.
guys. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But at the moment, kind of leaning toward a self-publishing kind of a situation. I'm looking around at publishers. I've had a couple of people throw some publisher names at me. They're all saying, well, unfortunately, you're not coming from.
Nobody knows who you are. Well, how do you get known?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've read a lot of things, different fiction, nonfiction. I do like the nonfiction because what's more ironic than life? What you write and how you write it is what is so attractive to me. You write like you speak, so you retell that story.
Rambling?
Not necessarily rambling, but to me it's almost comedic that you footnote certain things. Every time you footnote something that's blatantly obvious to me, but you know what? It might not be blatantly obvious to somebody who's younger than me.
You like that footnote I showed you a little while ago about when I got my first home, my first apartment is in a small little town called LaFontaine, Indiana. It's literally a one-horse town.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no traffic lights, there's no stop signs, there's no traffic, there's nobody walking around downtown if there is a downtown, and it's literally just a really small town. On the way down to LaFontaine, looking for this town,
right?
And I see the billboard that says, left on 20 Acres Road near Ruthie's Home Cooking Restaurant. And I'm like, holy smokes, this place really is like Hooterville. And there's my footnote at the bottom of the page, in reference to the fictitious rural town that you would see in the TV shows Petticoat Junction and Green Acres.
Green Acres, that's right.
Yeah.
If you could go back and taught yourself at 10 years old, knowing what you know now, what would you tell 10-year-old Erik?
What would I tell 10-year-old Erik? Well, the first thing that, and it's kind of funny because as I have grown and I've watched other broadcasters that, of course, they're about roughly my age. Mm-hmm. I'll use Pat Foley, who does the Blackhawks games. Okay. He's roughly our age, and I hear him every once in a while say, yeah, when I was just a kid, I've always wanted to emulate Lloyd Pettit, doing
Black
hockey
Hawks
broadcasts and stuff like that. And so he's kind of in the same vein, but he brings up his childhood where he really wanted to do that. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be a broadcaster. Well, what I would say to 10-year-old Erik now, knowing what I do now, you still have to go after what your dream is. Mm-hmm. Still stay focused. Of course, nowadays it's a little easier to break into the business because there are so many media outlets. There's social media, there's the podcasts, there's webcasting, there's
YouTube, TikTok, and
hundreds and hundreds of different
maybe too many
stations, probably too many.
Yeah.
But see, when I was a kid, there wasn't as many, thus not as many jobs. And of course, the internet was just a dream back then.
Yeah,
so
it was unknown.
Yeah, stick with it.
Absolutely. Erik, thank you very much for coming in today.
All right.
We got to get together again and sit down and talk again.
Sounds good. Thanks, Paul.
See you next time.
All right.
I kind of envy Erik for the passion he had so early on in his life. Before the age of 10, he knew he wanted to be a broadcaster, probably a sports broadcaster. And that moved on to other things, but he knew. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 10. I think I wanted to be a fireman until I was like 30, even when I was teaching. Erik is unique, though, because he keeps focused on his present. And yet, he embraces the past by retelling these humorous and sharing ironic moments from his broadcasting career. And he keeps learning, too. That's really important. Every day, in addition, Erik remains the dreamer of what may have happened. You know, like if he had taken the Roswell job. Those what ifs can get you sometimes. Believe me, I understand that. I know that for myself. But Erik Iverson has found this nice life's balance between the present, his past, and he looks forward to his future. Nice. Thanks to Erik Iverson for being our guest today, and I look forward to his book being published soon called If Only I'd Taken Roswell. For Life's Learning Curve, I'm Paul Hart. Subscribe to Life's Learning Curve at lifeslearningcurve.org and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Podchaser. Life's Learning Curve podcast is put together by producer Paul Hart with assistance by Don Paul, Steve Hagan, and Sebastian T. Dog. We're mixed by Heidi Cerner, technical director Hal McDonald. As always, music and audio assistance by Riley Hart. Our podcast content is intended for entertainment purposes only. On today's show, special thanks to author Erik Iverson. Look for his book, If Only I'd Taken Roswell. Not every reporter hits the big time. Coming very soon to your tablets, iPads, and bookstores. Check out our website, lifeslearningcurve.org, and leave a comment. But please do subscribe. We'd love to have you. As always, find us on Facebook and Instagram and listen to us just about everywhere podcasts are heard. I'm Paul Hart, and we will be back soon with more from Life's Learning Curve.
Roswell calling.
We're clear.